Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
We got Pamela Price, who's still here. So what are your thoughts on everything that happened in the last year? Loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to kind of put it in a historical perspective. And I was listening to some commentator on CNN this morning about how the rest of the world is like realizing like something has really changed in America. Right? Like they were saying the first Trump administration, they thought, oh, this is just a fluke. You know, he's a crazy guy. He got over. Okay, fine. Then Biden comes in and things from their perspective go back to normal, right? And I mean, to the extent that Biden represented and certainly reflected that he was a return to normalcy, you know, to the values and the norms and the constitutional expectations that we all share, regardless of our political sort of ideology. We all sort of take it for granted. There's a constitution, there's a peaceful transfer of power. You know, this is how it works, right? And the things that we saw Trump doing in the first term was like, he's just crazy, okay? But we got rid of him, fine. And then we brought him back. And, you know, so I don't know what to tell you. I was struck by the comment that the rest of the world is recognizing that things have changed in America. And for us as Americans, the question is, when are we going to recognize it?
I'm in denial personally.
I can't afford to be in denial. You know, when you're a Black woman, you can't be in denial. You just got to know, I got to figure out how to survive. And, you know, my sister put it aptly the day after the election. She said, today is the day for all Black women to rest. Okay, we're just going to rest now. We've been spending centuries trying to save democracy. And today we're going to take a rest day because everything that, you know, we have thought of as normal is no longer normal. And that's what we see now. We're in a very tenuous place. I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have studied the Holocaust a little bit and truly believe never again. I do believe never again. From the moment that I walked out of the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, I truly understood the horrors of that. And I just see the signs of what happened, what Hitler was able to do in Nazi Germany. I see Donald Trump doing in these United States.
Well, and, you know, we're talking again about using Guantánamo Bay, which,
right.
You know, we didn't learn the lesson the first time from that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just saw a flight of detainees from Guantánamo were returned to Venezuela, right? And again, the worldwide impact, you know, a lot of people in America are under the misimpression that immigration and the need to deport detainees is all about Mexico. And it's not really that. It's much broader than that. And for us in Alameda County, it has a broad impact because we are the fourth most diverse county in the country, believe it or not. We have people here from Afghanistan, from Yemen, from Thailand, from China, you know, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Eritrea, Ethiopia, from all over the world. People have come and settled here and raised their children, right? And what I've seen as a statistic is 53% of all of the children in this county, at least in 2021, lived in a household where one of their parents was born outside of this country. So we are essentially ground zero for immigrants to come, to settle, and you know, they don't always get their documentation right. And it takes time to get your documentation, right? It's such an arduous process that everybody is not successful at getting it done. They might not get it done the first time and have to keep trying. But we're in a stage right now where it doesn't really matter, at least what the borders are saying and what Trump is saying. We don't care how long you've been here. We don't care what you've contributed to our community, to your community, to our culture, to our country. We don't care. We're going to deport you. And that's so dangerous, right?
So from your perspective, what was it like to be the DA for the time that you had? And I understand, the negatives of it, but I mean, just what do you feel like you accomplished, even though you only got 2 years to really do anything?
Well, I feel like we did change the game somewhat. We certainly brought a fresh perspective to the DA's office. It was an organization that hadn't seen change in 50 years, at least 50 years, and that was pretty much stayed and stuck in just kind of in many, not only the historical contours of it, where every DA was appointed. And so it really was the good old boys passing it down to the good old boys, to the good old boys, to the good old boys. But also what we found once we got there, that the office was still very much operating pre-pandemic. The technology was outdated. You had some offices that didn't even have Wi-Fi. People were using their hotspots to get online and do their work. The lack of connectedness in the office. So the office had a lot of problems. We had to focus on health and wellness, because when we first got there, that's the first thing you were hit with, was that people were very traumatized. There had been 3 suicides in that office within a very short period of time. And the very popular finance director had a heart attack, and I'm told that his family blamed my predecessor for having put him in, a very stressful situation. So there was a lot of trauma that just kind of oozed out at us when we walked in the door. And so we really had to focus on health and wellness. Let's try to get everybody calmed down. And I think from as the perspective of a DA, one thing that I became aware of, and I don't think people appreciate, when you are in that role, whether you are the DA or more significantly as a deputy DA, you are seeing people, not only victims in their worst moment, but you're seeing the worst kind of tragedies, right? You're seeing people who were shot 4 or 5 times. You're seeing victims who survived being raped and assaulted, and people who have suffered horrible injuries. And you're just dealing with that every day. And so what I found was that it has an impact on the people who work there. We know that we don't spend enough time talking about the impact that of police officers when they are out dealing with different kinds of situations, right? The trauma that they endure. First responders, they get trauma training, they get support. My deputies didn't have that. And they are essentially in the role of a first responder. When somebody walks in to court, or you pick up a file and you look and you see 3 people were shot, dead in a mass shooting, you're dealing with that, right? And now you have those 3, for the families of those 3 people. You got to deal with the technical piece, the pathology, and all of the evidence that has to be brought together to make the case. Then you got to deal with the emotions of the family and the people who love this person. There's a lot coming at you when you're a deputy DA. And if you're not well grounded, and if you don't have, even if you are well grounded, I'm a very well grounded person. But it's clear that I could see how it can have an impact on you over time. And that some of the very difficult cases that they had. We had one case in particular where there were multiple victims and a series of murders conducted by this one person who now had turned state's evidence, and he was essentially our witness. And so my deputy was putting him on while the family members of the victims were like shooting daggers at her. They're in court every day. they want to kill him, right? And then other folks who are on his, basically part of his criminal enterprise, they're in court. So it was tense. And I had a deputy in the middle of all of that. And so after the trial, she said, I need to go do something that's not so stressful. I said, of course. And so, we were able to adjust her assignment. But when in fact, what I needed to be able to provide for her was trauma informed therapy or counseling to help her address the trauma that she absorbed. And I know that as a trial lawyer representing victims, that you can be impacted by the harm that they suffer.
So I'll ask you this question this way. Were you surprised by the vitriol of the media in their treatment towards you?
Absolutely. I ran for office in 2014. I ran for office in 2016. I ran for office in 2018. I was never attacked. And some of those elections I won, some I lost, and particularly the 2018 race, I challenged the incumbent. I was the first person to run for that seat in over 100 years. And I did not experience that level of attack and, media kind of basically the derogatory tropes and the things that were amplified and publicized by the media. I didn't see that before. So I think in the age of Trump, it's clearly we have entered a new day in our civil discourse. And that is politics, I'm told, has always been dirty, but it's really dirty now. And the media really amplifies the dirt more than anything else. And that was surprising and unprecedented. And the level of attention that we got from the media was simply unprecedented. I mean, one of my deputies did a search and found that my predecessor had been covered there by the media. There were like 2,200, about 2,200 stories in 13 years of her tenure. And in my short, less than 2-year tenure, there were almost 6,000 stories.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was just unprecedented. Most people in Alameda County didn't even know the DA's name before January of 2023.
Well, and we saw a little bit of that, with Chase on the other side of the bay during his tenure, was that it just seemed like every single thing that went wrong got amplified, and it was the fault of the DA.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And what we saw, yeah, they refined their technique by 2023 from when Chaser was being, pilloried by the media. By the time they got to me, and then you add in the fact that I'm a Black woman, I definitely they made me out to be public enemy number one. And there was just a level of ferociousness. And additionally, there was no interest at all in amplifying anything positive. We did a lot of positive. One key example near the end of my tenure, I think it was around September, October, we convicted a towing company of towing people's cars in Oakland illegally. Part of the judgment, the criminal judgment against them, was that they had to set up a settlement fund of $500,000 for people to make a claim if their car had been stolen. And maybe one media outlet covered that story. They literally would not cover that story.
And talk about the death penalty issue, because I felt like that got short shrift too, that here was evidence of wrongdoing that went back decades, and it was almost like people didn't care.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. It was the national coverage of that story was far more balanced and fully researched. The New Yorker article was exceptional. They really did the research. They talked to me, they talked to my deputies, they talked to the original whistleblower, they talked to the deputies who we know. We had their notes that they actually, engaged in the practice and trained other people how to engage in excluding Blacks and Jews from juries. And you're absolutely right. The local media was not interested in amplifying that story at all. And it was a major scandal. And in many ways, I think drove a lot of the effort for the recall, because once it became clear that we were not going to cover up this misconduct, then every prosecutor who came through the office who had any connection to it got behind the recall. And certainly there was a concerted effort to try to bury or minimize that scandal, which is it's unbelievable because it's clearly evidence of constitutional violations that impacted this community, which is why, Judge Chabria took it so seriously, and we were compelled to look at all of the death penalty cases.
And I'm still baffled by how California has chosen to kind of handle the death penalty overall. We essentially don't have a death penalty, except that we do, and it's possible that if somebody else comes into the governorship who's committed to actually executing people, it could resume at any time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we are very much in danger of having a Republican governor in the next election. And certainly it's of concern for us here in Alameda County. We lead the country, or we led the country in death penalty prosecutions and convictions. Jack Anderson, one of the disgraced former prosecutors who was at the heart of the death penalty scandal here, he bragged when he retired that he sent more people to death row than any other prosecutor in the country. So we're number 4 in, I believe, in the country, or we're number 4 in the country and number 9. We're number 4 in the state and number 9 in the country of the number of people we have from Alameda County on death row. And so, it's very chilling when you think about exactly that it's not gone. It's just stayed and kind of, in hiatus. And if someone decides, if we get another governor that says, okay, I'm going to lift this stay, much like Trump has said, I'm going to sign an executive order and undo something, prosecutors around the state, including the new DA in Alameda County, could start using the death penalty again.
And this is a county, correct me if I'm wrong, that twice voted overwhelmingly to end the death penalty.
Overwhelmingly, our people voted overwhelmingly to end the death penalty. But, and I took that into when I did my platform and I knew what I was running, I was comfortable with that. It was in line with my own personal beliefs, but I understood that this is where the people of Alameda County are, or they were at that time. And so it was part of our platform. I think that if there's going to be a shift in the DA's office and they're going to start using the death penalty, there should at least be some consultation, some way to give the people of Alameda County a referendum on that issue.
And what are your thoughts on Biden as he's leaving office, commuting 37 of the 40 people on federal death row?
Well, I think that was an act of mercy and compassion that was long overdue and very wise. I just read the other day that the new Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General, has transferred a death row inmate to a state where that person can be executed. So any person who did not get their sentence commuted potentially now can be apparently can be sent off to a state where they do death penalties, where they do execute prisoners, and they'll do it.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because, on the one hand, the 3 people that remain on death row are pretty bad. I think universally everybody would say that, but I've done a few interviews on this with other folks, and the consensus was, yeah, it would have been better for him to have just done them all and said the death penalty is wrong, rather than 37 of the 40 saying, well, the death penalty is mostly wrong, but sometimes it's okay.
I think that I wasn't part of his committee, but we know that, politics always plays a role in the decisions that our elected officials make.
So shifting gears slightly, in retrospect, and I've asked a few people this question as well, is the idea of trying to reform the system from inside the DA's office the right vehicle or the wrong vehicle for doing so?
No, I can't say whether it's the right or the wrong vehicle. I would say it's the only vehicle. Change has to come from within. And I've worked not only in the area, my experience in criminal justice reform has included both the prosecutorial apparatus as well as the law enforcement apparatus, looking at police departments. I'm very clear that the only way that any one of these institutions is going to change is if you have people on the inside of that institution who have the ability to direct the policies and the practices and provide leadership to the people in the organization to do something different. Otherwise, I mean, we can stand outside, like they used to say, you can stand outside all day long and throw rocks at the building. That's not going to change the building. The people in the building are going to keep on doing what they were doing. And so if there's any opportunity for us to go inside and make, good trouble and make change, then we have to take it and we should take it. And, I think George's tenure as district attorney in San Francisco is an example. He was able to do a lot of good and make a lot of changes there. Um, and certainly, if Chesa had remained in place, he would have carried out that legacy. There are other prosecutors, though, around the country that are having significant impacts. Larry Krasner has, really changed the game in Philadelphia. The whole cohort of prosecutors in Virginia are changing the game. Jose Garza is in Texas. Kim Fox was in Chicago. So we know that it's possible. It's just that the forces that we are up against are very powerful, very wealthy, and very well organized.
Anything you would have changed if you had to do this again?
Oh. Probably, I'm sure there are things I would have changed, but we should talk about that on Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'll be giving more information and more insights into what I think we could have done differently, and what we wish we would have done. Pamela
Fair
Price
enough.
Unfiltered.
And we'll talk about Pamela Price Unfiltered in a moment, but I did want to get your thoughts on the new DA.
Well, again, I think that we all have to take a deep breath and hopefully not hold it. We need to breathe, but we've got to give her a chance. Hopefully, no one will start to recall her in the first 30 days of her tenure. Most employees have a probationary period. When you start a new job, you get 6 months. Some people have 90 days. Some people have a year. We didn't get a probationary period, but I think that she deserves the chance to learn about the office. It's a very different office from when she left 10 years ago. So she's got to learn what the office looks like now. Like I say, she'll have the benefit of our advances. We've made incredible technological advances. The DA dashboard is launched. I don't know if you've seen that, but we're one of 3 offices in the state of California now that has a dashboard where people can look at the data from the office. As I said, we put a lot of health and wellness, and so she'll find a workforce that is a lot stronger than it was when we walked in the door. There were so many vacancies when we got there. We filled all the vacancies. We've done training. I think that she certainly has a head start from where we were in 2023.
But almost her first act in office was undoing some of the reforms that you put into place.
So, I mean, okay, so she gets to be the DA, just like I got to be the DA almost. I mean, I understood what my role was and what I needed to do, and I set about doing that. regardless of the noise that was brewing outside the office. I think that she will get a chance to evaluate what needs to be done. I will say, with respect to the special directive, which I'll talk more about this on Pamela Price Unfiltered, but the special directive had multiple purposes. And I think one of the dangers that she will hopefully be mindful of is that unless you have a policy where you are tracking and monitoring the use of enhancements, and keep in mind these are for enhancements are for very serious crimes. 75% of the cases that come through the DA's office never see an enhancement. There's no question about whether or not you want to add an enhancement or not. So we're dealing with a relatively small number, not a small number of cases, but a small proportion of the cases. And so for those cases where you're vulnerable, if you don't have a policy, is it actually does have potentially have an impact on public safety, because anyone who it receives is charged with an enhancement that believes that that violated the Racial Justice Act can move to overturn that conviction. And so you can go through the whole process and the conviction can be overturned. And so you need to have a policy in order to basically protect your convictions, the integrity of your convictions. We put a policy in place. We built the infrastructure to support the policy. We were tracking the impact of the policy. And those are the things that you need to have in place to be able to show that you're complying with the Racial Justice Act.
And then tell us about Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Yes, Pamela Price Unfiltered is my new podcast. My goal is to help people navigate the complexities of the world as it exists. Really, in Alameda County, we're in complete flux, right? I live in Oakland. We have a mayor's race. We had a mayor that was recalled. We have a brand new police chief. We have a city manager who came from nowhere and, is now in charge of everything. And we have a budget crisis. We have on the flip side, we have the great opportunity of the Oakland Coliseum being redone and renovated, and the first African American sports and entertainment group investing. We have Oakland Exchange, which is the NBA players, and they're talking about bringing millions of dollars to Oakland. So Oakland is in incredible flux, and I want to be able to help people navigate that and hear from the people that are having a voice or having an impact in that. Some of the decision makers. Then nationally, clearly, we're in a state of flux. We don't know if mass deportation is the first step to, the rounding up everybody else, right? Is he going to start coming after gay people after that? I mean, we don't know. And so we need to have a place where we can talk about these things, right? And so that's what I want to create and use the platform for raw, unfiltered conversations where we just talk about what's the news of the day, what's the issue that folks are most concerned about, and giving people an opportunity, like I say, to hear from folks, including myself, about where do we go from here.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question. Was Pamela Price ever filtered?
Pamela Price was very filtered in the DA's office. I took my responsibility as a DA. There's confidential things. There's so many things that happen with cases that you can't say. When I made some comments about some of the cases, the judges took those things out of context and used that. Certainly, defense counsel, with the collaboration of the bench, used that to try to get the cases dismissed. And so I felt very muzzled at times because I knew that the public had no idea what we were dealing with and why we were doing certain things and why we couldn't say anything. Oh yeah, there are lots of times I had to say no comment. I can't tell you all about that right now. So yeah, I was a lot filtered and muzzled as your DA.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you, David. I appreciate you and the work that you do. I appreciate Vanguard News, and thank you for alerting people to check out Pamela Price Unfiltered, the new podcast for raw, real conversations. Thank you.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com. That's Justice for George Powell, all one word, .com.